Edit the pipes library. When you open a new file, in the BIM Objects General Library there is a library of pipes for the mechanical systems as well as the pipes related to electrical systems, and they are divided by shape and material. If no piping has been activated on the file yet, the folders are present only in the General Library, while the Project Library and User Library are initially empty. If, on the other hand, a profile is selected, the commercial dimensions compatible with the material and shape of the selected profile become available in each library. By making different choices regarding the various default parameters set for the entities, the libraries will be automatically updated based on the changes made. Working on the drawing, when activating a pipe or duct, which by default have a specific profile and material associated, the corresponding library will automatically be copied from the General Library to the Project Library. If the material assigned by default is not the one you want to use, access the library either from the Properties panel or from the Project Navigator. Here you can select a different material, and possibly a shape to be attributed to the pipeline. For example, suppose to model a duct entity and choose to subsequently assign it the circular shape of galvanized sheet metal. The chosen profile is assigned to the activated entity and the related library is copied to the project library, together with those already present that may have been previously chosen. They will remain stored in the project library even if they are not drawn or if deleted from the drawing. The described operation generally applies to all MEP entities. After choosing the material and shape for the pipe profile, remember that you can always access the library and customize it. The libraries can be accessed from the Navigator by reaching the relative folder in the mechanical or electrical systems and opening the editor relating to the library to be customized. By clicking on the pipe or pipe field from the Properties toolbox, then on the Central button, which allows access directly to the editor of the relevant library in the Project Library. In the Project Library, the rectangular galvanized sheet previously assigned by default is shown, followed by the circular galvanized sheet subsequently selected and already in edit mode. In the main workspace, all the dimensions of the profile associated with that material are shown in table form. In case of a circular pipe are represented by thickness, external diameter, and internal diameter. Further parameters are geometric and therefore determine the shape of the model, and also some technical information are shown. In the case of air ducts, the pitch of the bracket expressed in millimeters, the surface of the internal section in square millimeters and the mass of the pipeline are also shown. The first column shows the conventional description of the size of the pipe, in this case the internal diameter. If you want to change this setting, click on the size field in the Properties toolbox and on the button with the 3 dots. In the dialog that appears you can change all the available variables. If you also want to modify the thickness, you can insert a separator dash and by clicking on the Variables button, choose Thickness. It is possible to customize the individual profiles in the library using the buttons in the toolbar on the right. The first button at the top allows you to add a copy of the selected profile to the last position in the catalog. The second button inserts a copy of the selected profile in that same position in the library. With the third button it is possible to delete the profiles. The fourth button allows you to delete any groupings created and restore the default table arrangement. Groupings can be created using the filter corresponding to one or more columns. Profiles with a certain thickness can be filtered by moving the mouse over the corresponding column and by clicking the filter symbol. One or more values can be selected. For example, selecting the thickness of 1.00 mm, all the profiles with that thickness are represented. Selecting the thickness of 1.20 will show those with this property. The grouping can also be carried out on the basis of different data by dragging the relative columns in the upper empty bar. For example, the thickness column is dragged, obtaining a first grouping based on the thickness, and then the internal diameter column is dragged over, obtaining hence a subgrouping. By clicking on the fourth button, all the present groupings will be eliminated. The last button allows you to open the legend of the parameters represented in the columns. It is possible to modify the values of the parameters, both for profiles already present in the library and for those added later. Click on the relative cell, type in the new value, and pressing the Enter key from the keyboard to confirms the modification made. Some parameters such as thickness, internal or external diameter, base, and internal or external height for rectangular shapes are interdependent. When one of these parameters is changed, the other will automatically adjust their values. From these parameters, the surface of the internal section is automatically obtained. This is a non-modifiable parameter. Same for the value of the mass of the pipe, calculated by the software starting from the dimensions set. And for the value assumed by the density, shown in the properties toolbox and related to the material used. Parameters that do not depend on the dimensions of the profile, such as the pitch of the fixture in the case of a duct, can be customized. In the upper part there is a preview of the pipe chosen, flanked by information on title, description, material and standard. These are associated by default to each material but modifiable from the Properties toolbox, clicking on the relevant fields. The toolbox contains all the properties relating to the selected pipe. By clicking on the material field, for example, it is possible to choose a different material to be associated with the pipe from the drop-down menu that appears. In the following fields it is possible to enter the material specification, the values of the roughness and the coefficient of roughness. It is also possible to define the stiffness by choosing from the relative menu between rigid, semi-rigid and flexible. The density is shown in the geometry section, and automatically updated by the software based on the selected material, but which can in any case still be modified and set manually. With the type field, on the other hand, it is possible to change the shape of the profile, choosing between the two options rectangular or circular. Based on the shape chosen, the library is contextualized by showing the relative dimensions in the columns and the section of the pipe in the preview. If you have a technical data sheet or any other file to link to the MEP object, you can do so by clicking on the Attached Documents field in the last section of the attachments. From here, clicking on the button with the three dots opens a dialog, in which you can add a new file or a link to an internet page with the plus button. In the subsection Automatic Fittings, the curve, the T-fitting, and the transition set for the pipe are shown, which will be generated automatically using the Smart MEP mode. They can possibly be modified by clicking on the relevant field and choosing from the libraries the fittings that will be assigned to the new pipe. The changes seen in the project library can also be made in the user library, with the difference that, if MEP entities have already been drawn, these will not acquire the changes made, which will instead only concern the entities that will be drawn later. Add a new pipe. In the project library or in the user library it is possible to add further new pipes and ducts, customized with respect to those already present in the general library supplied with the software. From the navigator you can access the project or user library, then the section of interest, mechanical systems or electrical systems. You reach the folder relating to the type of pipe to be added. For example, suppose to add a new duct, a new library is created with a basic profile to customize. Enter the name of the pipe in the title field of the Properties toolbox, for example stainless steel pipe. It is still possible to add a description, for example stainless steel duct with circular section for air distribution, the brand, the model and possibly the regulatory standard. In the characteristics section you can choose materials from those available and you can update the relating technical information in the relative fields. In the stiffness field, You can leave the pipe setting to rigid. If you need to define a pipe with a certain deformability, you can choose between semi-rigid and flexible. This property remains as technical data and does not affect the model. In the geometry section, the density is automatically associated according to the material chosen, and in the type field, the desired shape is chosen, in this case circular. The library shows by default only one dimension relating to the profile created, which is customized according to the section to be used on the drawing. For example, set an internal diameter of 300 mm and leave the thickness at 1. The external diameter is calculated automatically. A clamping pitch of 3 meters is inserted. Therefore, all the dimensions that are expected to be used on the drawing are added, using the buttons on the vertical toolbar to the right of the library. Assuming you also want to include profiles with internal diameters of 350 and 400 mm, click on the plus button and add 2 new rows to the library. The added profiles are customized, indicating their respective diameters and any other parameters. For a new pipe, you'll also need to set the automatic fittings feature, which need to be compatible with the chosen profile and material. The relating libraries are then accessed, where the fittings to be attributed to the pipe may or may not be present, compatibly with the chosen profile. If the desired fitting is not present, it can be created in the library, similarly to what was done for the air duct, and then associated with the pipe. For example, if you want to set automatic stainless steel fittings, which are therefore not present in the general library, you can access the fittings folder and from here to the folder of the relative fitting. Similarly, to insert a transition, right-click on the Transitions folder and choose the Command Append element from the menu. The editor of the new transition created opens and you customize it according to the pipe it will connect to. As with the pipeline, a title, a description and so on can also be assigned for the connection. The material compatible with the one assigned to the piping is chosen, therefore in this case stainless steel. In the geometry section, you can associate the transition with the length parameter or the alpha angle for calculating the length of the fitting, shown in the column in the library. Based on the profiles to be created automatically, you can generate multiple types of curves with different combinations of profiles in the relative nodes. For example, it is possible to obtain a fitting with a circular profile from one side and a rectangular profile in the other. In the preview you can already see the customization made to the model. In the example, the types of profiles are set both circular. Furthermore, it is not necessary to enter in the library the dimensions of the fitting that will be used on the drawing, as the Smart MEP mode automatically sizes the fittings based on the connections of the profiles to which they are assigned. The generated fittings will be automatically inserted in the project library too. The same procedure can then be repeated for the other fittings. A new element is added to the curve folder and proceed with the customization of the entity. In this case the title is changed to stainless steel curve. Stainless steel is selected from the material field and the circular type profile is considered. Proceed in the same way for the T-joint, first creating a new element and then modifying its properties appropriately from the toolbox. As for the transition, also for the T-joint it is possible to model the two profiles of the nodes with different shapes, according to the needs. In the example, let's suppose to assign the circular type to both the main pipe and the branch. You then go back to the modeled pipe and assign the newly created automatic fittings as default automatic fittings on the entity. By clicking on the curve field and then on the button with the 3 dots, you access the project library to choose and apply the created stainless steel curve to the pipe. Proceed in the same way for the T-fitting, selecting the stainless steel T-fitting from the project library and finally for the transition the stainless steel transition. A newly created entity is inserted. The Properties toolbox shows all the settings envisaged during the creation of the entity. The associated title appears in the pipe field. The profiles added in the catalog appear in the size field, followed by the material, the fitting set, the profile selected. If you want to add a connection that has different dimensions to a traced section of pipeline, by choosing the dimension selected from catalog option proposed when making the connection, you will automatically obtain the fitting set on the created entity, therefore the curve and the transition between the two profiles of different sizes. By selecting the transition, in the Properties toolbox you can read all the properties set, including the title, stainless steel transition, and the material. The profiles in the connections are created automatically by the software based on the dimensions of the connections of the pipes, therefore regardless of the presence or absence of these profiles in the catalog of the fitting, this privilege of the Smart MEP mode. By selecting the curve, in the Properties toolbox you can read, in the same way as for the transition, all the properties set, including the title, and the material. If the break command is used on the pipe, a joint is obtained. Starting from the latter, a further duct entity, of different size, is modeled, obtaining a T-fitting. The T-fitting obtained is the one previously created in the catalog and set on the pipe. Remember that automatic fittings can be modified both on the entity, by returning to the project library editor, and individually on certain pipes that you want to model, by setting them in the Properties toolbox.